Industrial food production has been designed to take cost out of production. The costs don't go away. There's a dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico that's part of the cost of farming the way we farm. No wonder people eat the wrong stuff. It is so good. It's almost like cocaine, it's addictive. Sit down, grasshopper. I'll explain it to you.
Welcome back to the Marian Flaxman Network Podcast, a podcast dedicated to reintroducing personal narratives into critical public health topics. On today's episode, my conversation with Will Harris. Will is the owner and operator of White Oak Pastures, a regenerative farm located in Bluffton, Georgia. Will is a fourth-generation farmer, and he now runs the business with his daughters, their spouses, and their children, who will be the sixth generation in the Harris family to operate the farm. When Will first inherited the farm, it was operating as a fully industrial cattle farm, raising cows to sell for slaughter. But one day, everything changed. Will decided to do things differently, to switch to regenerative ag, and to rebuild the health of his farm, the soil, plants, water, and animals, as well as the health of his community. In this conversation, we talk about that journey and about the role of farmers in the food system and in health advocacy. We also talk about the challenges of advocating for change and why criticizing people is not the best way to motivate them. Finally, we talk about White Oak Pastures' nonprofit education arm, the Center for Agricultural Resilience, or CFAR, and the exciting work they're up to, teaching people how to implement regenerative practices in their own communities. Please enjoy my conversation with Will Harris. Well, Will, Mr. Harris, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for being here.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for hosting us down here at beautiful White Oak Pastures down in Bluffton, Georgia. It's far from DC.
It is. It's far from everywhere.
It is. It is far from everywhere. What's the closest airport if you're flying?
The closest dependable airport is Atlanta.
Okay.
We've got some little regional airports that will leave you stranded when you are in the biggest tight, when you need them the most. Mm-hmm. But I don't fly out of them. I fly out of Atlanta, which is at least 3 hours away, actually a little bit more.
Okay.
So you've got to leave probably 5 hours before your flight, which means it takes all day to go anywhere.
Well, then I think driving the 14 hours is a much simpler choice.
And given the opportunity, I'll drive.
Yeah.
Then nobody can delay my departure.
Except for you.
Except for me.
Amazing. Yeah. So for those who don't know, can you tell me a little bit about how White Oak Pastures became what it is today, from the farm that you inherited and took over to the farm that is now known for its regenerative practices?
White Oak Pastures is our family farm, started by my great-grandfather in 1866. He was a colonel in the Civil War, captain, I'm sorry. I promoted him. He's a captain. He lost his farm in the Civil War. We don't know exactly how that happened. That's the family lore. He had an uncle who was a medical doctor in Bluffton, this little town, who started him over in 1866. He ran the farm all his life, followed by his son, my grandfather, who ran it all his life, followed by his son, my dad, who ran it all his life, followed by me. And I'm lucky enough to have two adult daughters who are helping me run the farm now, who will ultimately run the farm, and their spouses work here. So we are, 4 generations in. And then we've got a bunch of grandchildren around here that I hope one day one or two or more of them will have the interest.
Well, there are so many of them. I'm sure at least 1 or 2 will.
There are 7 of them. And, my experience is that if you're a parent with an only child on a farm, they may or may not take it over. If you've got 2 or 3 children, somebody will, in a pretty good farm, somebody will probably take it over. So I'm optimistic.
Yeah. Okay, so did you work alongside your dad when you were a kid and growing up?
I worked for my dad. There was not much alongside to it. He was in the truck. I was out working. But yes, I did. And my dad was an only child, born in 1920. And I was an only child, born in 1954. So we were like best friends, business partners. We could hunt together, fish together, eat together, drink together. We could not work together. I mean, it was everything he said made me mad, and everything I said made him mad. But I did work for him. And then after I graduated from university, I took over the farm.
Okay. And when you took it over, it was not the regeneration station that it is today. So what were things like then, and how did you begin to move them to how they are now?
It absolutely was not what we do today. It was a monocultural cattle operation. We had raised nothing but cattle. We used copious amounts of fertilizer and pesticides on the land. We used copious amounts of hormone implants and subtherapeutic antibiotics on the animals. And it was profitable. You know, I went back and looked, and we paid taxes every year as far back as I looked, and I looked back 30, 40 years. So we, I say it was profitable. It was not super profitable, but it was working as an industrial farm. Of course, the changes I made was to de-industrialize it. And I ran it industrially for 20 years. And then I made the decision to do it different. I did a lot of things differently very quickly, probably too quickly, but it was okay. And evolved it fairly rapidly into what we do today.
So I have read/listened to your book, which is amazing, and I recommend it for anyone who's curious to know a lot. But there's a story that you've told about a moment where you were watching one of your animals get loaded onto a truck to be taken away to slaughter. And something in you in that moment kind of like shifted. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, that was a changing point. I remember that. We marketed our calves primarily by shipping them to the Midwest. And we would load a 2-deck livestock cattle truck. We'll haul 50,000 pounds of cattle, which is 48,000 actually. But that's about 100, 500-pound calves. And I have done that a lot in my life. I did it working for my dad. I did it for myself. And it was fine with it. But that day, it was different. For whatever reason, and nothing was really different, it just seemed wrong. We pushed them onto the truck. They didn't want to go. We pushed them on, made them go. And they were going to be on that truck for maybe 48 hours. So for 48 hours, they'd been on that truck, no food, no water, panicked. The ones on top, urinating and defecating on the ones on the bottom. It just seemed very wrong for the first time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so that kind of moment stuck in your mind, and it led you to, did you literally immediately start making changes?
Yeah, pretty much. I just said, I'm not going to do this anymore. And that caused me to change everything. If I was not going to ship them to the Midwest for confinement feeding, that meant I had to finish them myself. And I was very fortunate. This is in the late 90s, people were just beginning to talk about grass-fed beef. Nobody had heard that term
right
prior to that. So I was very much in hopes I could tap into that market. It was harder than I thought, but ultimately we did. Had we not, it wouldn't have made it economically.
Right.
But I had to figure out how to do it without using all those tools that science had given us, the pharmaceuticals and other tools, the feed, formulated feed and such. But we did eventually. It wasn't as easy as I had thought or hoped, but it was kind of fun. And but we did figure it out. We did get started raising what I could honestly call grass-fed beef. And the timing was so lucky. It was perfect. And it wasn't, I wish I could tell you that I was a shrewd business guy that saw it coming, visionary. It wasn't like that. I just didn't like what I was doing anymore. So I had to do something different, and this is what I wanted. This is what was different. But it was when people were first really talking about grass-fed beef. The chefs were cooking it and writing about it. Just hearing and reading a lot about grass-fed beef, and nobody had any.
Right.
Just people weren't doing that much. A little niche here and there, but nobody was doing it much. And I had a lot. I had 700 calves ready to slaughter. So we were able to get into Whole Foods. Well, Publix was the first one. Publix is a supermarket chain in the South. We were able to get into Publix, and then we were able to get into Whole Foods, and we had some really good years. And like all good things, it didn't last forever, but we had some really good years for a while, and that's when I needed it. That's when I was changing all the rules here on the farm. And I'll always be grateful for that.
Yeah. Well, I'm very grateful because I can buy your meat at Mom's Organic Market in the DC area, which is a locally owned chain. It's been growing very quickly. And one day, a couple of years ago, they didn't have it. And then one day, maybe 6 or 8 months ago, I walked in and there it was, the logo that I know so well. And I texted my husband and I was like, I'm buying 10 pounds of ground beef because I want them to feel the demand. Like I want them to keep ordering. Yeah. So now like every single week I go to Mom's and I get all my beef there. And well, I do order some from my local farmer as well. Shout out to Carl. He's awesome. There's a guy, his farm is an hour from us and he hand delivers.
And that's the way it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
We, thank goodness we were able to get in these supermarket chains and get us started. But, I really want to be a local provider. Yeah. I raise too much product to sell it in Bluffton, Georgia.
Right.
But I would love to just be a Georgia or Georgia, Florida, Alabama provider.
Yeah.
Now, I need to sell X volume of material, product to make my business work. And I can't sell enough in Georgia, Florida, Alabama. So I feel a little bad about selling product in 48 states. Because I don't want to be responsible for somebody not being able to sell their product locally. But I gotta sell a certain amount.
Yeah.
So my hope is in time that other producers grow their business and are able to market product, and enough consumers will find the value in what I sell that more people will do it in a smaller area.
Yeah.
Our goal is not to grow this business. It's bigger now than I ever intended for it to be. And it's got to stay this size because I've borrowed the money to make the investments to operate at this scale. But most business people I know, independent business people I know, somehow want to do more and more and more every year in perpetuity. And really, we're big enough. As a family, we've made the decision that we don't want to hire a CEO. We don't do that. And this business is as big as it needs to be with our management ability.
Yeah.
Me and my daughters and the other management people that work here, we couldn't manage a business twice as big.
Right.
It's just out of our depth.
Right.
And the idea of hiring a CEO is abhorrent to me. I just can't imagine, we think generationally. We make decisions based on what my grandchildren will need. A hired CEO is thinking about the month, the quarter, the year. Mm-hmm. So just out of the chute, you're at cross purposes.
Yep.
So, I don't want to CEO, and I wouldn't want to be Will Harris's CEO.
You're like, I wouldn't want that person to have to work for me. I mean, they don't want that.
I see the train wreck.
Yeah.
Before it gets here. So we're not going to do that.
Yeah.
We are big as we want to be. Probably a little bigger than I would have chosen to be, but I did what I had to do. You can't build a slaughterhouse,
right?
To slaughter just a few. Right. You got to build it at a certain size,
right,
to get past all the USDA stuff you got to do.
So to keep the animals here, it has to be big enough to make sense.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that requires a big investment, and you can't get a return on that investment on just a few cattle. You got to maximize the capacity.
Yeah. Well, I think, and this could be a whole other conversation, but I think that there is a lot that the business world could learn from nature about sustainable, healthy growth that plateaus and sustains its community and around it without dominating. I mean, when we talk about uncontrolled growth in the economy, we tend to think, yay. But if you hear about uncontrolled growth in a biological system, it's cancer, it's an invasive species. So we can sort of see that uncontrolled, unrestricted growth is pathological. And yet when it comes to businesses, we think, ooh, yeah, they should grow as big as they possibly can. But when you look at anything natural, that's not usually a good thing.
Well, 85% of the beef in this country is processed by four international distributors, and that's just too much market concentration.
Yeah,
that's not going to end well.
No, and we see it when there's like a recall of like every beef in the entire country that's been put into every single product. Yeah, the good news, and I do think that what you said about, I hope that getting my product out there helps other small farmers. I do think that it works that way, because I think that as the brand of regenerative grows, the first time someone hears that term, like, oh, what is regeneratively raised grass-fed beef, right? Then they go look it up. And then maybe they go to your website, maybe they order it, but they probably also Google around in their own community. I know I personally, I now buy from my local farmer at least once a month, if not every week. And he's not just got beef, but he has eggs and he has milk and he has cheeses. And, it's a whole variety of things he's offering. And that's sustaining his family. There's a farm in upstate New York, similar thing. It's a husband and wife, and they're raising cattle on land. And I bought half a cow from them, right? So definitely I do think that people will be moved to buy their local product after learning about your product. But I also want to add, the soil down here is different. And I feel like it makes the grass different, and I feel like it makes the beef taste different, because I notice a very specific and unique color and flavor in your beef that, like, no offense to the beef I buy up north, but it's not there. Have you noticed that?
Oh, there's no doubt in my mind.
Yeah.
There's... what is it, Terra Noir? Is
that
how you say that?
Yeah.
Well, my Latin's a little off.
It's a dead language, don't worry.
But it is. I mean, that's the way it is. And when I have this conversation a lot, we've got a nonprofit 501c3. We bring people in and train them, and I make it perfect. And people come from all over the country, and I make it internationally. I make it perfectly clear that now, what you'll learn here are basics. You can't do it just like I do it.
Right.
And I can't do it just like you need to do it. We get 50 something inches of rain a year, and it comes almost equally every month, except for October and May, which are changing the season. They're just so many things. We do we do a great job growing warm season perennial grasses. We can't grow alfalfa. You know, I can just go on and on about things that are just different. And I've done a lot of traveling in my life, and most of it's been agricultural traveling. And so I go to farms, farm events, and I'm 71 years old. I've been doing this all my life. I majored in animal science at the University of Georgia. Some of the descendant of great cattle people. I think, I have no idea what you do here. Because it's different.
Yeah.
You know, and if you don't know anything about cattle production, you think it's fine. I mean, it all looks the same. Green grass, you know, it's not. It's so different. The ecosystem is so vital and so different that you got to know how to work it.
Right.
And I'm just always aware, I have no idea what you would do here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, how does, for example, in upstate New York, there's at least 3 months of the year where the ground is frozen solid. So the cows obviously aren't on pasture. Your cattle, I imagine, can pasture almost year round?
But literally year round.
Literally year round.
I don't have a cattle barn.
Yeah.
That I have one of my equipment for working cattle is a cattle barn. They don't live there.
Yeah.
They don't. I don't have a place for cattle to spend the night.
There's no cattle hotels.
We could sit here and come up with countless differences.
Yeah.
In what every ecosystem is. And you know, an ecosystem, you're talking about upstate New York, and we're in South Georgia. 30 miles from here is a little different. Mm-hmm. Not that different, but right. It matters.
Right, right. You know, this might seem like a different topic, but what this is making me think about, so I'm just going to share, is how each human is different. Every single person's body is different. Their gut microbiome is different. And yet, if I went to the doctor and you went to the doctor and we both said, I have a headache, they would prescribe the same thing, basically. How could that possibly be right? Right? Like if 30 miles down the road from here, the soil is different enough to an expert like you know, someone who's really been in it, that there's like a meaningful difference, right? Maybe not noticeable, but like meaningful. How is it possible that a human ecosystem, that it makes sense to treat everyone the exact same way? Because, or that, you know, if I said, what diet should I eat? And what diet should you eat? And some dietitian or, you know, well-meaning nutrition person would say, oh, here's a healthy diet you can both eat. Are you sure?
Sit down, grasshopper. I'll explain it to you. So, complexity and complicated are two very different things. You know, I don't know what kind of car you got, but whatever kind of car you got, it is very complicated. I mean, what happens in the motor, the drivetrain, transmission, it's very linear. Your body is very complex. It's not linear. Mm-hmm. And to treat a linear system as though it was complex, or complex system as though it was linear, is so wrong. But that's what we've done with medicine and so many other skills, life skills, and it's just wrong. It's not right.
Yeah.
And I think that there are different people in medicine that have embraced that and looking more at complexity versus complication. That, you know, you talk about your body in that case. I'll tell you about farming. So, you know, I just told you that if you go just a few miles in any direction, it's different. I told you I went to the University of Georgia. They had professors hired, PhD professors, who had their doctorate in soil science or animal science or microbiology, on and on and on. The whole gambit of disciplines. And those guys and ladies were teaching at the University of Georgia. They could have transferred to Maine or Arizona or Oregon and taught the same course in that land-grant university, because we've made it linear. Mm-hmm. And I think that's so wrong. But it has simplified education.
Yeah.
You could become an expert. If you the old adage, more and more about less and less. When I was at Georgia, I was a very, very average student. I just didn't do that well. And I thought, I'm just not very smart. And a lot of people would agree with that. and maybe it's true. But the reason I didn't do very well is I didn't want to know all there was to know about one thing. Mm-hmm. I want to know a little bit about all of it. And when I came back here and went to work, the way I think and learn and approach things works so well, because whether it's genetics or fertility or plant science, I know a little bit about it. Mm-hmm. But I don't know too much about any of it, and it's okay. In doing what I do, it is so complex, not complicated. Being able to scratch the surface and everything is a good approach.
Yeah.
I could go on about that.
I totally relate to that as a student. Like, I have recently realized that for me, I learn best if I'm curious about something and I go searching for the answer. If I'm searching for the answer to a question that originates from me, or that originates in response to something else that I'm learning, I will go find that answer and I will never forget it. But when data is just being dumped into me and I have to memorize it, not good. I don't enjoy that.
I got a dear friend whose name I will not use, he's on the speaker circuit, and he's a real expert in what I do. And I give him a hard time because he wants to know all there is to know about the microbial fungi. I don't care. I know what it does. If I do this, it'll do that. I don't know nearly as much as he does about following the path of exactly what does what in it. But I run a lot more cattle than he runs, and it's okay. I don't feel compelled to know but a little bit. But I want to know a little bit about all of it. And yeah. I think that's important.
Yeah, especially for managing, as you said, a complex system.
And a complex system. If it was a complicated system, it's the opposite. You would know all there is to know about that.
Right. I mean, I hope that my mechanic is an expert in my particular kind of engine, as opposed to he knows a little bit about every engine.
No, the fact is, if he's a mechanic, that's the kind of guy he is.
Right.
I would make a terrible mechanic. My dad used to say, what did he say about that? He said, you don't want a cowboy working on your stuff. He meant me and him.
Yeah, unless your stuff is cows, in which case.
We were using my mechanic. Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier that you would love to be the beef purveyor of Georgia. And I know from some announcements that you guys are working on opening a store in Atlanta. Is that correct?
We are, and I'm excited about that. So we hit on this earlier, but when I started this business, I started it as a wholesale business. We're in Clay County, Georgia right now. Clay County was the poorest county in America in 2020, literally.
Wow.
I don't have a very good local market. So when I chose to do what I did and spend a bunch of money on a processing plant, and I knew I was not going to sell my product here. And I didn't try. I initially sought wholesale accounts to move it somewhere else. And that worked. It was successful. Now we want to bring it back more local, and we are opening a store in Atlanta, and then the original plan was to open a store, to find a facility somewhere. But we were contacted by a development group who they're from Austin, Texas, and they have acquired an old poultry processing plant in northwest Atlanta. And it was an industrial plant that they closed in the 60s. Atlanta grew up around it. And it appears to me that when they closed it, they just locked the door and left. All the equipment's still in there, or much of the equipment's still in there.
Wow.
And these developers have bought this sprawling facility and cleaned it up, moved it out. They're making it pretty. And they're going to have a number, I think it's 20-something farmer vendors.
Sort of like a food hall?
Yep.
Okay.
And we're the meat people.
That's awesome.
And we're excited about it. It's another way of monetizing our product and bring it back more local. And I'd like to think that if it works, if it's not enough to sell what we need to sell, maybe there'll be another one in Florida or Alabama.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
The goal is not to have them all over the country.
Right.
The goal is to have them as local as possible.
Right. Little regional food delivery system. Mm-hmm. That's so amazing. And will you guys do food, like cooked food like you do here? Or will you just be selling meat? We'll
just be selling our product. There's a great chef in Atlanta named Annie Quantrano. She's a Michelin 5-star, and she has the food service contract for the facility. So she'll have a restaurant there.
So you and I met at the Rodale Institute at a regenerative agriculture event. Which was very fun. Mm-hmm. And I feel like we're maybe unlikely friends, right? Like I'm from the burbs and I'm from New Jersey originally and now DC and New York. You're from here and you've always been from here, Southern Georgia. You wear a cowboy hat and I sadly do not because I would not look as cool in it as you do. You know what? I could try, but I think I would just be a poser if I wore one.
If I had a head full of pretty hair like that, I wouldn't wear a cowboy hat.
Well, thank you. But when you and I first started talking, we just immediately saw eye to eye on so many things, right? We were joking and laughing and just like agreeing on so much. And I don't know. First of all, I say that because I think like sometimes people create divisions where there aren't any just because maybe of where someone grew up or the hats they do or do not wear. But also because I wanted to ask you about being a farmer in the world, also in the US, because I don't know if it's often talked about that farmers are a minority group, right? And have been shrinking over the years. Farming is hard, it's expensive. As you mentioned, like when you're running an industrial model, it can be profitable, but it's also expensive. You're buying all kinds of inputs and medicines and equipment. And so, you know, there are many minority groups I don't belong to. There are some that I do. Like I'm a woman, right? But I feel like in conversations about groups that need advocacy or that benefit from advocacy, you know, I'm a food allergy mom, right? My daughter has food allergies. That's a group that benefits from advocacy. And it's always really important to put people with food allergies at the front of the conversation because without their voices, you don't even know who you're trying to help. Like if the food allergy conversation is only run by scientists studying food allergies, that's a very sterile conversation. Complicated, not complex, right? So when it comes to farming and farmers, I think this is also a group that would benefit from advocacy. And yet so many of the benefits for farmers or help for farmers that you hear conversations happening, it's not farmers at the front of the conversation. They're not being asked to lead the conversation. It's experts, maybe researchers, maybe people who have done a lot of funding of agriculture, right? So I wanted to ask you about that. As a farmer, who do you think should be leading the conversation about what farmers need?
Well, certainly farmers, but it's more complex than that. There's a huge division in who are farmers these days. You know, I was a very industrial farmer, very linear, very production oriented, and all I did is produce the raw material, cattle. Somebody else took it and further value added it until the consumer bought it. The consumer didn't buy from me as an industrial cattleman. Fast forward to now, what I do is very different, and I have sometimes allowed myself to be excessively critical of industrial cattlemen. I used to be one. I'll tell you up front, the industrial cattlemen I know, and I know a lot of them, are wonderful people. But we're on such different sides of the industry that few discussions that would be beneficial to me would be beneficial to them, and vice versa. So I think that the gulf between farmer and consumer is certainly one we have to recognize. But there are other gulfs. The other gulf is the division between farmers. You know, we industrial farmers, like I used to be, are generalists, specialists that produce commodities, beef, cattle, not beef, cattle, corn, cotton, soybeans, etc., hogs, sheep. And they pass it along a very well-established trade route to someone who processes, then further processes, then value adds, then markets. And it's fine. And most farmers, and I'm talking about my family, have through the generations eased into that business model willingly, because it was easier and easier. You know, if you can produce a load of cattle, soybeans, rice, and pick up the phone and say, I have a load of whatever commodity you produce, and some guy comes and gets it and sends you a check, boy, that's nice. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying it's great, but it's simple and easy. Whereas if you own those, if you're the farmer that produces those products, you own them, you make the decision to retain ownership and add value, further processing, and then marketing that. You just add so much complexity to the system that nobody wants to do that. I didn't want to do it. You know, it's just not, I don't enjoy it. I do not enjoy. I built a nice slaughter plant. There are not many farm-owned slaughter plants in the country. When I built mine, there was only one. It was in California. I built it. I'm glad I built it. It's been economically beneficial for me. I have not enjoyed owning a slaughter plant one day in 20 years. Not one day. But I had to do it because I wanted to raise cattle a certain way, and I had to get them processed in order to monetize it, to market it. So it's when you start talking about the differences, you really have to. It becomes very complex again.
Yeah.
There's that word.
There it is.
But it does.
But so I started my sort of preamble, right, by saying like, I'm a girl from the north and you're a guy from the south and I'm from the burbs and you're from the farm. And again, there's kind of this conversation in America right now about like how different people are, how like divided they are. And yet up close, I think most people, like you're saying, industrial cattlemen, right? Like at the end of the day, a lot of them, they're good people. They want to run their business. They want to take care of their families, right? They want to have a good life. And I feel like it must be scary thinking about change. I think a lot of the reasons that people feel divided are because they're afraid of what? I mean, different things, right? Maybe afraid of saying the wrong thing or being embarrassed, or change in general is scary. When you were making those changes, when you had your aha moment and decided to change everything, were you afraid? Was there ever fear there, or were you just like so gung-ho about it?
Oh no, a lot of fear. I didn't tell my wife what I was doing. Truly, I didn't lie, but I certainly didn't tell the whole truth, because I was already lying in bed worrying about it. There was no need of both of us lying in bed worrying about it. So, what you were saying earlier, I'm told the most bitter wars are civil wars, brother versus brother. The more you have in common when there's a falling out, then the more bitter the conflict. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what happens in farming. When I was an industrial farmer turned whatever it is I am now. And wrongly, I felt compelled to tell my friends and neighbors and relatives how wrong what they're doing is or was. And you can imagine how warmly that was received.
People love being told they're wrong.
Yeah, everybody looks for that. So, understandably, that was not something they were going to accept. That criticism, they're not going to accept that criticism just mildly. But I felt compelled to, and I in retrospect, I was way overly critical and wrong in the way I presented it. And I deserved a lot of the animosity.
Yeah. I think, so I was a very young mom when I first became a mom. And I think in a way it benefited me because I learned at a really young age that children are just people. They learn by watching what you do as opposed to you like scolding them and telling them what to do, right? They're much better at accepting something if you're modeling it. It gives them time to consider it, to see it, check it out. Like I'm eating healthy in front of my kids. They see me eating healthy. I'm not like, you should eat healthy. And then, whatever. And so I feel like in general, that's true. Do you feel like at this point, as opposed to like lecturing farmers on what they should do, like you're just modeling what you see as the best way forward?
Well, in that example, so that was way apart, because those children that are observing you are not irrevocably committed to one.
Right.
They're learning and figuring it out and deciding what they want to do. In the case of farmers, they are almost in some cases, in most cases, almost all cases, irrevocably economically committed to doing what they do. A cotton picker cost $1.4 million, and it won't do a thing in the world but pick cotton for 8 weeks a year. And my friends and neighbors and relatives own one. And they borrow the money from the bank to buy it. And if I tell them how wrong it is for them to produce cotton
as a monocrop,
industrially, as a monocrop, then that's the last thing they want to hear. They are irrevocably committed to paying back this $1.4 million, and I'm telling them how stupid. If I don't even use those words, how stupid they are for doing what they're doing. They're killing all the life in the Gulf of Mexico, driving species into extinction, giving people cancer, on and on and on. All the things that I can come up with and plagiarize to convict them of doing something wrong. And they got to pay back $1.4 million.
Right.
And they don't just, by the way, they don't just have a cotton picker. They have an interest in the cotton gin. They have an economic interest in the cotton warehouse. They are, and they're expert cotton producers. They went to the land grant university and learned how to do it. Their dad was good at it. They have expertise.
Right.
And to be told what you have expertise in is wrong and it's bad and it's destroying the planet. That's not a good message.
I've also learned that doctors don't like hearing that.
But it's much the same.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about the example I use with those farmers. You use conventional doctors the same way.
Right. Yeah, they've spent $250,000 on their education.
Incredible investment in education. Incredible investment in equipment,
drug development,
technology. Mm-hmm. The people they've hired that they thought they want. I'm doing more. I got to let all these people go.
Yeah,
I got the wrong people here.
So a couple years ago, I did a podcast episode called "What Do Farmers Worry About?" and I interviewed 3 farmers, and I really just asked them, "What do you worry about?" And I was expecting, I think, for their answers to be environmental because they were all, organic farmers, pasture raising, whatever. All of their answers were about money. It was all economic. And so what that episode turned into actually was like an economic analysis of how we subsidize farms in America, how a subsidy in theory should be a cultural statement about what we value, but it has sort of flipped around so that we subsidize and send, money to products that then we tell people not to eat. Like we subsidize the growing of sugar and then we finger wag and say, you should eat less sugar. But then the consumer is having the same confusing economic experience on the other side. They're being told to eat one way, and that way is more expensive. They go to make their food choice. We were driving down here, we stopped somewhere, and there was a sign that said, like $6, like foot-long sandwich, bag of chips, and a drink. And I thought, damn, if I could eat that, I probably would, because $6, I can barely buy anything for $6 the way that I eat. So it makes sense. People have a lot of choices to make in their lives. They're running their day-to-day, they have a job, they have many things to think about. And then they go to the store to make a food choice, or they go to the restaurant to make a food choice. And some things are more affordable and also very tasty. Why would you choose the opposite when every pressure in society is pushing you to buy the junk food? So it sounds like what you're saying is farmers are really dealing with that too. The whole system is set up for them to do it this way.
Yeah, let's talk about that a minute. Since World War II, the way we eat, the way we prepare food, the way we think about food is so different. And since World War II, how much money has been spent by the big food companies to make food taste good, it's convenient, easy, and when I say taste good, really addictive.
Right.
Addictive.
Hyper palatable.
Hyper palatable. What a great term.
It's a great term.
It's a great term. Hyper palatable. As compared to what I'm going to call real food, which requires some preparation in most cases. You can screw it up. We just on and on about the advantages of this food that we've developed since World War II and the way people eat, if they're eating naturally off the farm, whole foods and whatnot. And, I mean, no wonder people eat the wrong stuff. It is so good.
Yeah.
And it's it's like it's almost like cocaine. It's addictive.
Yeah.
And I used to eat that way, and I'm not saying I eat copious quantities of food, but I eat good food. I eat the right food. I eat too much food, but it's I feel really good about the choices I make.
Yeah. Well, earlier you said that children and farmers were different because farmers were intractably committed to certain things. But I will tell you, when it comes to getting children to eat healthy, children are intractably committed to sugar. They just love sugar so much. They really are committed to candy. And every day it's like, no, you do actually have to eat meat and vegetables if you want to grow a healthy body.
And you probably know how highly subsidized sugar is. One of the most heavily subsidized crops.
Right. Which is crazy. And no judgment to sugar farmers because I get it. Again, they're doing what they do. But when we have nutrition advice, we have a public health system that is saying, and this is not new, for years it's been like, limit added sugars, right? Well, how can you tell citizens of a country to limit something and then subsidize the production of it? How does that make sense?
And you may know this, but even today, the food subsidy programs are very favorable for southern crops. Do you know that?
No.
So when the crop subsidy programs were put into effect, 50 years ago or something, the senior people in the ag department and the other departments were Southerners because in that era, Southerners elected their politicians for life. When you got elected to be a senator or a representative, you stayed there forever. We could Richard Russell, Talmadge, we can go down the list. And committee appointments are based on seniority. And the South was agrarian. So you got these politicians who are super senior, so they get to pick where they go, and they were incentivized to be on the ag committee because it was an agrarian economy. So the most heavily subsidized crops were sugar, tobacco, peanuts still, cotton. We can go to there are others. We can go down the list. Today, corn and soybeans are pretty heavily subsidized, but that's a more recent change in the program. But so many of these financial incentives that we have come from politics, and the politics was not based on good nutrition.
No. Well, again, that could be an entire other episode. We could just talk about that. So I won't go in that direction, but and you've been so generous with your time, and I really appreciate that. So I kind of want to bring it home and ask you about the education nonprofit side of the business, the Center for Agricultural Resilience, CFAR. What do you guys have planned for the upcoming season and the upcoming few years? Because I think a lot of what we've discussed during this conversation is really kind of pointing to how important it is to just get the word out about this type of farming.
Because the land-grant universities don't teach much the kind of farming we do, there's a great appetite for it. And we had a lot of people that would come here and say, or call and say they want to come here and learn what we do. And that's hard if you're not set up for it.
Right.
We all my managers have got duties and jobs, and they got employees. And if Sally shows up from Atlanta or Newark, New Jersey or somewhere, they really don't have time to give her what she wants. So we formed the nonprofit, a 501c3, and I thought that would make it a lot easier, and it made it better. I wouldn't say easier. So we have an executive director, a great guy, Dale, that you met earlier. And he has sessions, probably 12 or 15 a year, on everything from animal science, cattle production, hog production, vegetable production, on down the line. And we teach it with our own employees. And we don't travel. We made it clear that we're not trying to make money with this, but we can't afford to send people to New York or Chicago or San Francisco, because these are the people that run this farm. We can bring 25 or 30 people to the farm and have them take 2 hours during the day to come teach their segment, their discipline. And it's worked well. We're not in the best place, I insist that we do it here on the farm, and the farm is remote.
Right.
So we're struggling. We've got $1 million grant to build a training center, and we've got some other contributions. And we hope we'll put some lodging in. Not sure about that yet, but hope to. But we'll have a training center, and we will train it with our people, and our people are experts in their line. So I think it's been successful. The classes are small, 25 usually. And there seems to be a high satisfaction rate. We send out questionnaires and ask them how they feel about it, and we seldom get a negative comment and get some really glowing comments. So we're happy about that. It's kind of my way of paying back a little bit.
Yeah. And hopefully also a way to get this information out to communities where, you can't go and set up this farm in every state, but maybe people can come here and learn and then go set up their operation.
I think it'll be a long time, if ever, that land grant colleges, ag colleges, embrace what I do. So much of their financing comes from the large pesticide companies, fertilizer companies, genetics companies, etc., that they just can't afford to embrace what I do. After I graduated from the University of Georgia, for many years, we had a lot of students. The vet school held a seminar down here every single year. The senior vet class came down. We had a lot of that. Seldom a month go by we didn't have a busload of visitors from the University of Georgia or Auburn or somewhere. But that ceased when I quit farming that way. When I started farming more regeneratively, it was we didn't get mad and yell at each other, but they didn't bring students here anymore. And I understand it. That what I was preaching was not what they were preaching, and they were getting paid to a certain curriculum, and what I was talking about was sometimes in opposition to that curriculum.
Right.
So, it was, and it was not traumatic to me for them not to come. It made me sad a little bit because I felt like that those students weren't getting the other side of the equation, exposed to the other side of the equation. But
so first of all, I want to just say thank you so much for having us. And then I just wanted to ask one final question, because I've been thinking a lot about what you were saying about the divide between, regenerative systems-based thinking, complex systems farming versus farmers who are doing industrial farming. And it reminds me a lot of the divide between more complex systems people in nutrition versus those who are more medicalized and linear when thinking about, healing and human health. And it bothers me. It bothers me that these divides exist. And so I'm curious if you have any thoughts about what could be done maybe in the next year, maybe in the next 20 years to shrink that divide.
Well, sadly, the divides do exist, and they will exist. And there's nothing really meaningful going to happen in a year. It's just not. People are too committed to their own system, and we could talk about it forever, but it's just true. And I think it's probably good that there's not a mass conversion from industrially producing food to producing it the way we produce it and some others. The fact is, industrial food production has been designed to take cost out of production. Now, the costs don't go away. There's a dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico that's part of the cost of farming the way we farm. There's Roundup everywhere that's part of the cost, on and on. There are many costs that still exist, but they're cast aside. And what it does is it means that the industrial commodity food is cheap. And sadly, there are people that need cheap food. None of us want to hear that. We don't want to say it. But there are people that need cheap food. I don't want anybody hungry. And I'm told there are people that are hungry now. I don't know any of them, but I'm told there are. And if every producer immediately started producing food the way that some of us think it should be produced, you're going to add X% to the cost of food that some people already can't afford. So I think that I'm not saying there will be a natural evolution, but I'm saying that if we have change, it's better if it's a natural evolution. It'll be slower. Mm-hmm. And that means more people can, hopefully more people can figure out how to buy it, or the system will accommodate it. So I used to want everybody to farm the way I farm right now. And I now realize that if that's not what is going to happen, it's not what should happen. But I do believe that more and more people, more and more farmers are embracing this production model. It's slow. It's very slow. But I think that as time goes on, more and more farmers I don't really think a lot of farmers are going to convert. I think that the change in production will come from new farmers, people that are starting. But I think there will be some of that. And I think that, how much change, how quick, I have no idea. But it will be slow, and contrary to the way I used to feel, it needs to be slow. There needs to be time for people to become positioned so they can't afford it. Maybe it's the government helping them afford it, maybe it's whatever. But I think that's where we are with it.
Yeah, I agree. And when I look back on my own journey with the term food as medicine, or with my belief system around using food to heal, 23 years ago probably is when I started really using food to heal myself. At the time, people thought I was literally crazy, and doctors would laugh in my face or think I was stupid for asking if how I ate might be impacting my health. And now fast forward 25 years later, and food as medicine is becoming a buzzword. There's policy movements behind it. And it's not so crazy anymore. So I think what you're saying, I have a lot of hope that will be how things go, because 20, 30 years, slow evolution, people seeing examples and things catching on, I think we could get there.
I've been on this path for nearly 30 years. I thought that everybody ought to change immediately, that, I'd made these decisions on the way it ought to be, and that I thought everybody should embrace it. But that's just not the way it works. And we've been on this path since World War II. What is that, 80 years or something? And and it's a huge tidal wave. It's not going to correct itself overnight. But I think that we do see some gradual change. And I think that recently the acceleration has increased. At one time I thought I was an early innovator. I never heard that term, early innovator. Everybody's heard it now, but I can remember when people started talking about the early innovator, the stages, and I said, early innovator. That's what I am. I didn't say it out loud to myself. Early innovator, that's what I am. I'm an early innovator. And what I'm doing is going to create the opportunity and demand for more and more people to do this. And then I'd go for a while and I wouldn't see much change. And I said, well, I'm not an early innovator. I'm what they call a niche marketer. And that's all right. I'd rather be an early innovator than a niche marketer. Because if you're an early innovator, you're helping a lot of people. If you're a niche marketer, you're helping yourself. But I can live with that. Okay, I thought I was an early innovator, but I'm not. I'm a niche marketer. And then we'd go for a while, and there'd be some things changed politically or from a market perspective. And I say, maybe I am that early innovator. And right now, there's a lot of conversation, a lot of discussion, and I'm feeling a little bit like an early innovator again. But, if I'm a niche marketer, that's not what I want to do, but that means I can make a living. It means my children can make a living. It means the people that choose to buy my products can do well. So either way, I'm okay, but I'd rather be an early innovator.
Well, only time will tell, but I think that you're definitely an early innovator.
Well, I can't say I don't care, but it's okay either way.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I'm an early innovator, that means more farmers get to do what we do, and what we do is fun. It's been good. It's been, we're not rich, but the quality of life has done nothing but get better and better for the last 30 years.
Yeah, and not just for you, but for your whole community.
For me, for my community, my employees, and my family, and the greater community.
Because you mentioned, maybe we can, give this little reveal. You mentioned earlier that in 2020, Clay County was the poorest county in the U.S., but a rising tide lifts all ships. So as White Oak Pastures has grown, so has improved the economics of Clay County, right?
It's literally the facts. 2020, Clay County was the poorest county in America. You can look it up. Not Georgia, America. We're the largest private employer in the county. 170 people, payroll's nearly $150,000 every Friday. 5 years later, we're not the poorest county anymore. We're still very low, but we're not the poorest county anymore. And there is no doubt White Oak Pastures contributed to that.
Yeah.
How much? I don't know.
Yeah.
But we did. And that is another benefit. Not only do I hope that the people that buy my product live longer and are healthier, but the people that it gives people the opportunity to get to work here and enjoy a little more prosperity than if I was still a commodity cattle farmer.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me today in this conversation. And again, thank you for hosting us on this beautiful farm. And I hope we'll come back again soon, and maybe we'll be talking about your new teaching space or your new restaurant.
Well, thank you for coming. You're always welcome.
Thank you. Thank you once again for listening to the Marian Flaxman Network Podcast, a podcast dedicated to reintroducing personal narratives into critical public health topics. For more information on me, Marian, please visit my website at marianflaxman.com. For more information on my guest, Will Harris, and his farm, White Oak Pastures, please find the links in the show notes. This episode was produced by Brain Trust Productions and sponsored by Inform Solutions Consulting. Once again, this podcast is not affiliated with my work at Cornell University. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time.